Hey guys, welcome back to the Hybrid Athlete channel. I am Dr. Paul Rimmer, and today we are going to do a rare race review. A reason there's a rare race review, which isn't easy to say, is simply because, let's face it, running ultramarathons is something that we can do a few times a year. We might tick a couple off in our training, but actually pushing ourselves and seeing where we end up on an event day and really trying to break ourselves in the best possible way is something we can only do a few times a year. Hopefully, obviously not breaking ourselves. So this video is going to be broken down into three parts. One was the event itself, the organisational side of things, signs, directions, aid stations, all of that stuff and my experiences with it. Second part is going to be talking a little bit about the course itself, how I found the course, and then the third part really is kind of just my experiences of how my race went. So feel free to check in and check out whenever you wish, really. Let's talk about the organisation. So overall, I thought the organisation was really good. If I was going to give it a mark, I'd give it like a 7 or 8 out of 10. Now, if the things I will be picky over on my own personal experience, so anyone who's followed me for a while or has seen any of my content will know that I picked up a bit of an injury and I wasn't actually going to do this event. So just to caveat everything we talk about today, I'm talking about an experience that I've had as an injured runner going into this. And I'd had a couple of training runs to test my knee out, and I kind of knew that I wasn't going to be able to do the full 100 kilometers. So I decided that by hook or by crook, the furthest I was going to do, if I did the event at all, was 50K. So I emailed the event organizers and I said, sorry, this was about 12, 13 days before the event. I said, I'm really sorry. Is there a chance that I can transfer to next year, defer to next year? Got this injury, it's not going away. Or can I, if I can't defer, can I get a refund? If I can't get a refund, can I at least put it up and see if anyone wants to buy it? Because I'd rather just not run with an injured leg. And the response I got was, sorry, it's within a certain time frame. You have to pay an additional fee to protect your entry, which I'm sure was on the site, so this is my own fault, my own responsibility, but I just don't remember seeing it there until I clicked through. And then when I did check for this year's entry, it's like an extra 35, 40 quid to protect yourself in case you pull out last minute. And I was sort of a bit like, to be honest, I've never had that experience with another event before. So I understand why events do that, but it's a big event. I think there's over 1,000 people running on the various different events. So the events ran 50K on one day, the Saturday 50K on the other, so you could split it with a base camp in the middle, or 100K straight through, which is what I'd originally signed up for, which I then decided to just do the first 50K because I couldn't pull out because they wouldn't let me, really. So after a couple of email exchanges, I just decided that, you know what, I was going to turn up on the day. I had a few clients there, a few friends running there. So I'm going to turn up on the day and I'm just going to run what I can. Off my training runs, I guessed I had about 25 to 30K in my legs. And then I'd just see where I was. If I need to drop out, I'd drop out. But I wasn't wasting 160 odd quid or whatever it was, 130 odd quid. If I got that price wrong, I apologise. Whatever, it was over 120 quid anyway to enter. I wasn't just going to waste that when I thought, well, I might as well see what I can get out of it. It was my last run of the year before we go into powerlifting season. Anyway, with that being said, so that put a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth that I couldn't defer. The reasons they said they couldn't defer to next year were understandable because there's a lot of entries. It wouldn't be fair to take up slots in the ballot for next year. But also it's kind of like, right, so what am I supposed to do now? Waste the money or run injured and potentially hurt myself more? So anyway, after a couple of training runs, I decided I was going to do the 50K. So everything today that I discussed in terms of the race will be up to around about the 50K mark. I can't talk about the course and what happened after that because I don't know. I wasn't there. But I will be there next year, hopefully. So that left a bit of a sour taste in my mouth at the start anyway, just because of that. But it wasn't, to be fair, like that was understandable. Other things that I thought could have been done better. So I finished at base camp at the 50 kilometer mark. And the buses there were only taking you back to the start, or you could get a bus from the finish to Swindon train station. Like literally Oxford train station is like 10 minutes, it's like a 5-minute detour, 10-minute detour from the loop, from where the midpoint, the base camp is back to the start. So at the end of the day, when I was getting the bus back from the base camp after the 50K, back to the start line, for me personally, and again, this is my own biases, if you've got your own car, your own transport, whatever, then I'm sure this wouldn't be an issue for you guys, but I don't have a car, I don't drive. So for me, it was kind of a bit of a hike and a mission to this small town to then try and find a bus that ran every hour. And for the sake of that coach just being rerouted for 5 minutes, it was great that they put these coaches on back to the start line. So there's a car park at the start line, a car park at the finish line, and there was a shuttle bus running between them The finish line one had a shuttle bus via Swindon train station, which is kind of at the end of Race to the Stones. But the midpoint one flirted with Oxford. Now, anyone who will tell you if they live in London, where I was staying, that it's much easier to get from Oxford than from a town with a bus once every hour or so. But the race itself was easy to find. No real dramas in terms of like signage or parking at any of the venues that I could see or any of my clients or friends had mentioned. When I got there in the morning, it was great. I literally got dropped off. I got a taxi from where I was staying, which was 15-20 minutes drive away. Unfortunately, that was the other issue. It was fine getting a taxi from Civilization to the start line. Not so easy to get an Uber or a taxi back. There just wasn't any. So that was the reason that it was kind of challenging for me. So again, that's my own biases shining through. So yeah, I thought that the shuttles were a really good idea. I think just the route planning could have been a little bit more convenient for there wasn't just me in that situation there was a couple of other people on the coach who were like, got to go back to the start line, but then it's like a 20-30 minute walk to the nearest bus to then get the bus to the nearest train station for the sake of a 5-minute detour. Like no one would have minded that. So yeah, all in all, very good. Coach was really nice. Everyone was really friendly. The organizer really friendly. Turning up in the morning, like I said, easy enough to get there. Off a major route, no two difficulties. If you could get an Uber, that was one issue as well. So if you are going to do this and you're staying somewhere nearby in Civilization and you are going to get like an Uber to the start line, book or a taxi, book. There was literally nothing. I was like proper panicking at one point, but yeah, and that was at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. So obviously they were a bit overwhelmed with people trying to get to and from places and stuff. So yeah, that was a bit stressful for a little bit, but anyway, all came out in the wash, and that was my own fault for not being organised. So yeah, I'm not going to give the race organisers any issues for that. So yeah, rocked up in the morning, got there, everything was fine. Going through to the start, pens, everything needed to be. The only thing I did feel was a little bit rushed, and I got there with plenty of time, and it was like, right, whatever group B, I think I was in, group B, we're starting like now, get to the pen now, and it felt very rushed to go to the toilet, and then we were in the holding pen for like 10-15 minutes. I get they've got to get people there, but I just felt like it felt a little bit rushed, but actually it wasn't. But how to find the pen, toilet availability, everything like that was like absolutely fine. And so then on the course itself, there seemed to be enough people at the various pit stops. Course navigation was absolutely fine. There was no issues with marking the course. It's a pretty easy trail to follow as far as I did, which was up to 50k, well, technically 49.8 according to their GPX files. So and my GPS. The aid stations were pretty well manned. There was a couple of ones there which were really well manned, and obviously those were like about, I think, the 35k mark, and a lot of people were struggling. So for context, it was a blooming hot day. I nearly swore then. It was a blooming hot day. Like, there was a lot of people who had issues with dehydration. Even though the aid stations were fairly well spaced apart and in convenient locations, I think in terms of ultras I've done, I think the distances between the aid stations were, I've got it written here, were 8.7 kilometers. So the distances between them, so from the start to the first one was nearly 9k, from the first to the second one was nearly 12.5, 13k, from the second to the third one was 14k, from the third till the finish line was another 14k. So again, not too bad in conventional, like if it was, I know it was the start of summer, so it was in July, I can't remember what date it was, 10th of July, 9th of July, 9th or 10th of July, somewhere on that weekend anyway, which is how much attention I was paying. Yeah, the weather was ridiculously hot. There was exposure all day. If you are going to do it, take your suntan cream, probably the key thing. And always just have if you've got your, most people have like 2 little bottles of water attached to their race vest. I did take an extra handheld bottle and just fill that up and threw it into my running rucksack, just in case, and it definitely came in handy. The event organisers did do really well to put on a couple of like drop-in kind of water places that I don't think were meant to be there, but then there was lots of other opportunities for support crew on the route where there wasn't aid stations, where it's a big friendly event, really loads of support there. It was really nice. So if you were in any trouble or difficulty, I definitely saw people helping people in that situation. So yeah, it wasn't freakishly hot weather for the UK at that time of year, but it was certainly, there was just no cloud cover really all day apart from the first maybe hour at the start, so it was a really, really hot day. So yeah, aid stations had everything you'd want: water or rehydration solution. Again, my only personal criticism of this, and this is a good lesson to learn, is that I think the supplement sponsor was High Five. I've used their products before. I know loads of people who use their products absolutely fine. For me, they just upset my stomach, the gels, whatever. So if you are going to do an ultra marathon and you've not used certain gels or things before, or whatever bars they've got, if you're not taking your own food, then it's always worth just checking and testing on your own runs, which I'm fine with a wide variety of foods. And to be fair, I had no intention of going fast. It was only 50k. So the main two things for me were electrolytes and water, and just a little bit of snacking. And I took a couple of little of my own supplies in my backpack, just in case, you get in difficulty, a little bag of Haribo, some salted pretzels, stuff like that. So the aid stations were really well manned, really well run. Directions were absolutely fine. And the bit I liked best, actually, and it was quite cool, and this is one thing I will say, is because even though I'd signed up for the 100-kilometer event and I only did the 50, they were really cool with like giving you a medal for that, even if you stopped at that point. So I've had races before, like my 100-miler, when I dropped out, even though I'd done 100k, and it felt like a failure, and got this cool little, and it felt like a bit of a failure. So like, there we go, there's the medal, race to the stones, little thing at the back. I like the fact that they accommodated that. So if people were having a bad day, and some people were having bad days, the base camp was really cool. So because the base camp was really awesome, there was overnight camping there for people who were doing day 1 into day 2. There was a big, massive marquee. There was some live music there. There was 2 MCs at the finish line for day 1 who were like just chatting all day, loads of energy, speaking to the crowd, congratulating the runners coming through. There was, coffee, there was ice creams, there was crepes, there was burgers, there was pizza, there was loads of stuff there to indulge on if you wanted to. There was beer, of course, and I had a couple of bottles, I'm not going to lie. And it was a really good atmosphere there. It was nice to just get a chance to stop and chat to people. And the one thing I would say, which was a massive benefit, is quite often in those kind of events, it's kind of like being stuck in an airport, if you know what I mean. Like, they just hike the prices up. There, the prices were completely reasonable for everything. So it wasn't one of those where you're paying like £5 for a coffee or like double the amount of cost for a beer. It was fairly reasonably priced, especially by London prices. So I know technically wasn't in London, but it was close enough. So southeasterly prices, shall we say. That was great. Only other criticism of the base camp was they had good toilets, so not criticism, positive, sorry. They had good toilets, good washing facilities, they had a shower and stuff there. The only, I'd say, slight criticism I had was in terms of the organisation of the coaches and stuff. The coach times were set. You could book onto the coaches really easily, pay on contactless, no need for having cash and stuff. That was all great. The only issue was that I had to leave to wait for the bus. It's only just outside the base camp, so it's not like massively traumatic. But I was waiting there for like 20 minutes, half an hour, and they changed the time of the bus because of delays. That's absolutely fine, but no one made an announcement for it. So there's kind of people just moving around a little bit confused. But again, in the grand scheme of things, it was fine. I had to just go over to the information tent. And what I'm doing here is just being massively picky and comparing this to some ideal dream event from my own selfish perspective. So I think some of the criticisms I've got are valid. I think some of the criticisms that I've given are just personal criticisms about me being a child about it and saying, that's not a fair thing to say. So, if anyone from the race ever watches this, I think it was a great event. Like I said, I'd rate it a 7 or 8 out of 10. Only issue I would have, which I would say was not just my issue, but other people I was speaking to, is just making sure that those shuttle buses had a couple. Okay, so let's move on to the race itself. So like I said, I can only talk about the first 50k. So from the start to checkpoint 1, which was at 8.7 kilometers, nice, gentle, easy rolling start. And then the last kilometer or so, there was like one quite steep climb there. I was just having a fun day at the office, so I decided to just challenge myself because I was only doing the 50k. Knew my knee wasn't going to hold out too long. So I tried. My goal was to try and run all of the hills. And what I would say is on that first stretch to checkpoint 1, I underestimated the elevation gain on the one bit of the hill. So I did run it, but I was blowing out my backside when I got to the top. But then, to checkpoint 1, I think it took me about an hour. And that's like, I'm not a fast runner. So for context for anyone watching this, my trail half marathon time with a little like minimal amounts of elevation gain is around about an hour and 50. My 5k time's around about 21 minutes is my personal best. 5k time of around 21 minutes, 20 minutes, just dipping under 21 minutes I think I've done before. It's been a while since I've done a 5k time, so can't remember. And marathon time of just under 350-ish, give or take. Again, never run a flat marathon, so I'm just going off what my paces are when I've run ultras before. And a typical 50k ultra time for me would be anywhere between 5 hours 45 and 7 hours 30, depending on the kind of elevation gain, terrain, and how my body was feeling that day. So yeah, that's kind of where my pacing is. And what I found was the first checkpoint, 8.7, I got to bang on time what my pace was, which was around about an hour. So from checkpoint 1 to checkpoint 2 was 12.6 kilometers. And that started off with a little bit of spiky up and down, really nice traily stuff to run, and then it was just gradually downhill to around about the 21 half marathon mark. That was nice and easy to run. I think, yeah, if I recall, it wasn't as fast as I thought it was going to be, but I think that was partly because I was being quite protective of my knee at that point. So leaving checkpoint 1 to checkpoint 2, like I say, first bit's quite undulating, a bit traily. I'm looking at my notes and I can't remember. And then a lot of it was like downhill towards checkpoint 2, which was at the half marathon distance. I targeted around about 2 hours 10 minutes for that. I was running fairly comfortably. I think I ran the whole of that stage with no issue whatsoever. Maybe a couple of little bits that I'd walked up or was taking food and fluid on. And then from checkpoint 2 to checkpoint 3, this is the bit where the race kind of sucks you into a little bit of a bit of a false sense of security. So that's from around about the 21 kilometer mark, so the half marathon, up to the 35 and a half. And I think this is the bit where a lot of people, if they'd gone off too fast at this point, i.e. this guy, because I was trying to run the whole thing, that's where it was going to pay. And probably because I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't really that as focused on my food as I should have been. So I noticed that by around about the it would have been about the, I've got it here on my notes, around about the 29 to 30 kilometer mark, after it being fairly flat and kind of like undulating, it's basically all the way uphill to the 35 kilometer mark. And it's like, it's just a long, it's not like a massively harsh gradient, it's not difficult, but it's just a long slog. So if you're running this race for the first time, what I would say is, on the first stage, up to the first checkpoint, that first hill, chill. On the second leg, just because it's downhill all the way, don't hammer it and think this is easy. And then from checkpoint 2 to checkpoint 3, even though it's flat for the first bit, take your time, take loads of food on board, or as much food and fluid as you can on board. And then, because from around about the 30k mark, right the way up to that checkpoint, particularly on the day it was roasting hot, you're getting tired, fatigue's in the legs. That was a real slog, and I wasn't really, after about 25, 26k, my knee had started to then flare up. So I was back to walking at that point. So I think around about, at checkpoint 2, I was bang on schedule. I was about 2 hours 10. At checkpoint 3, I think I'd scheduled about just over 4 hours to get to the 35.5k mark. And I think I was about 4 hours 30. So I was about half an hour behind. And at that point, I was kind of walking. And then from checkpoint 3 to checkpoint 4, which was the finish for the day, at 49.8 kilometers, that was kind of a little bit undulated down, and again it was uphill all the way, but again it wasn't quite as aggressive as that checkpoint 2 to checkpoint 3. At checkpoint 3 it was really funny, like there's people just like ice buckets, dipping their head in things, throwing water everywhere. That's where I think a lot of the aid crew were there for that day. And then, like I said, checkpoint 3 to checkpoint 4 was just another gradual, graded, just sapping approach to the finish. And it wasn't easy. So I would say it's very easy to go too fast in the first half of the race. In the first half of the race. So the first quarter, first 25k, say. What I'd want to do with that if I was going to run it again is I would want to be at that 22, 23k mark. I would want to be there feeling like I'd barely ran. So I'd be walk, run, nice easy paces, walking the hills on that first bit. Because the good news is, and now I obviously didn't do this, after checkpoint 4, so which is where base camp was, most of the elevation gain is done in that first half. So looking at my GPS, my Garmin, I think the total amount of elevation gain for the full 100 kilometers is around about 1,000, just over 1,000 meters. According to my Garmin, we'd done about between 800 and 900 meters, and the gain was in that first 50k. So if you're doing the 100, be aware that like once that's out the way with, from checkpoint 4 onwards, it's a couple of hills and it's spiky, but it's a lot more undulating, so it's not quite that same constant slogging uphill. And the last checkpoint, which is checkpoint 7 to the finish, is basically a little bit up, and then it's mostly downhill and then flat to the finish as well. So if you are worried about time, and fatigue and things, then I would say that just take it easy. Obviously, I know a lot of people might suffer with blisters and stuff, so yeah, it doesn't matter how much energy you've got left in your legs if your blisters are still absolutely killing you, so you can't run anyway. And that was the frustrating thing for me. I got to the point at about 25k where I couldn't really run anymore. And it didn't really bother me because, to be honest, I hadn't really fueled or eaten properly. So yeah, I think just to go over that again. So from, I think at about checkpoint 2 at 21.3 kilometers, I was bang on schedule. I think at checkpoint 3, which was at 35.5 kilometers, was about half an hour, 40 minutes behind where I wanted to be. And then at the finish line, I predicted about 6 hours 45. 5 hours 45 if I'd had a good day, which I knew I wasn't going to have because of my knee. And I think I finished in about 6 hours 50. I'll put all the data around here somewhere. So yeah, overall, I was annoyed that I didn't run under 6 hours 30, but considering I've had knee issues, that is that's a bit of a win for me, really. I was just happy to get to the finish. So with that being said, a few bits of advice. I'm going to try and direct this depending on where you are as a runner. So I would consider myself a middle of the pack runner, a middle to sort of top 30%. An approach for if you're a fast runner, so let's say you were looking at a sub 10 hour time for the 100k and a sub kind of like 5 hour time for the 50k, then I would say that the advantage of starting early is great because it was a bit cooler, and I would say that there's no need to carry loads of equipment and kit with you. You probably get away with just having like handheld water bottles. You don't need too much in terms of extra aid like a head torch or anything like that, especially it's the middle of summer. If you're a good experienced runner and you know the terrain and you like I say, you've just got experience of being in that, then it's a really good course for a really fast time, really easy to navigate. Didn't need maps, didn't need compasses. The only thing that I would say that would be a personal preference would be just having some music with you if you needed it. There was no need for anything like an emergency blanket or anything like that, in my opinion. There was no need to have a proper race day rucksack with you. Like I said, there was no real over-the-top safety requirements or demands on that day. Only thing I would advise taking would really have been sunscreen and a shower jacket or a poncho just in case. But apart from that, you weren't going to get yourself in any bother. For middle-of-the-pack runners like myself, I would say it's probably worth taking a running rucksack with you, just to have a few extra supplies in, a little bit of extra water, and just a few other bits and pieces as the day got hotter as well. So making sure that you've got like buffs or scarves or things like that just to create a bit of shade for yourself, because it was definitely a big issue. And if you're a super slow runner or a walker or a hiker, I would say, you don't need to be carrying too much extra stuff. The distance between the aid stations wasn't that far, but a lot of people did get themselves into some issues with dehydration and particularly electrolytes. I think people underestimated how much they were going to lose in their sweat. So yeah, fast runners, just to some electrolytes. Everything else you could run between the aid stations. Middle of the pack runners, a little day sack with a little bit of extra water, some electrolytes, and maybe a little bit of extra food and some buffs and stuff. And then add to that, if you were a hiker or a slow runner, your extra stuff for blisters. It was a hot day, sweaty feet, more chance for blisters and things as well. And again, I would say if you are blister prone, that it wasn't a particularly brutal course for blisters or like slips, trips and falls. I did see a couple of people stack it. But nothing too bad. So yeah, it's quite an easy course to run, and definitely one where I would say next year I'm targeting as a primary event, because I think it's somewhere now I've got a bit of experience on the course. I can run a reasonably fast time there. So a reasonably fast time for me would be a sub kind of like 5 hour 30 50k, and then a sub 12 hour 100k is what I will be targeting next year, if this knee heals up. So that brings me on to me. Feel free to tune out now, where I'm at the moment. So after finishing Race to the Stones on the Sunday, I flew to Ibiza for a week, which was good fun. Did a little bit of training out there, a little bit of time splashing around in the pool, one session in the gym, just because if I don't train when I'm away, I absolutely hate coming back and getting muscle soreness. So I just did a couple of very borderline even worth calling them workouts. And then I've just been into a recovery block now. So I'm not going to go into what's in my recovery block, but basically I'm not going to be able to run for 3 or 4 weeks minimum. Even walking I have to sort of limit, because I'm not going to lie and say that it was a bit of a stupid idea for me to even do the 50k, but it's definitely aggravated something that was already aggravated. But it's not painful just walking around as long as I don't do too much on it, so that's fine. So my recovery block is basically just a semi-structured training program. So I've got a load of exercises written down, I roll a dice, I choose what I'm going to do, and then I do those things. I'm spending a lot more time in the swimming pool. And the reason for that is just simply because it's low load, it's allowing me to get some intervals in, and maybe not next year, but the year after I really want to consider doing an Ironman. I was chatting to a few people who've done some of the more extreme triathlons, So that's something I want to push towards, which is actually was my original idea for getting into this kind of hybrid athlete endurance stuff, was to do that. And then kind of COVID happened and pools were closed and I'm a terrible swimmer. So I'm using this as an opportunity now to recover and get some swimming volume in before powerlifting season starts. The shift in my focus and my content is going to go very much back towards my strength training, what I'm doing, how I'm doing it. And yes, there will be some running in there as well. So please stay tuned for that. The next video I'm going to post though is on, probably post something this weekend. And on that, I'm just going to talk about how I'm structuring this recovery block and what recovery really is and the point of recovery. Because I think people just get the idea of recovery completely wrong. Or maybe not completely wrong, but I just think there's more useful definitions of it that will help people not just use recovery as an excuse to regress in terms of their performance in their training, but also still facilitate their body recovering. So we're going to go into that anyway. Right, guys, hopefully that was useful to you. If you are going to sign up to Race to the Stones, please, let me know, give me a wave, like, subscribe, follow my social media stuff. It's posted in the description below. If you are interested in any ultra running programs or anything like that, I've got some on the membership site. So again, please check out the link to my website there as well. I've got a live Q&A on ultra running for beginners and more advanced athletes, which I'm going to be doing this Sunday. Obviously, you might be watching this back somewhere in the ether in the future, but that will also be loaded onto this channel because it's going to be recorded on Zoom. So please check that out. And yes, take it easy, guys. Happy running. Whatever it is you're doing, wherever it is you're doing it, do it well. Speak to you later, guys. Peace.